Good evening, Falcon families. My name is Laura Hartley. Some of you met me if you were on the webinar a couple of weeks ago, so welcome back if you were there. And if you are joining us for the first time this evening, I'm happy to welcome you. As I have introduced myself before, I am the provost here at Seattle Pacific, and we're doing this series of webinars for parents and families over the course of this fall as a way of providing an opportunity to let you know the different ways that we are working with your students. We are approaching the end of week 3 here, believe it or not. And from working with first-year students in particular for a long time, one of the things we know is that this is about the time of the term when they start feeling just a little bit overwhelmed, where some of the workload is starting to kind of overtake them, and they're not always quite sure what to do about that. So I thought it would be a great topic tonight to talk a little bit about student success and specifically about the many different kinds of support resources we have here at SPU for your students. So I have invited 4 amazing individuals who each oversee a different aspect of student success here at SPU to answer some questions that we've come up with together and some questions that parents have already posed. I would also invite you, if you are joining us via Zoom, to open up the Q&A box. And if you have a specific question about any of the topics we're going to discuss tonight or want some more information about resources for supporting your students, please feel free to ask us a question live and we will do our best to get to those. If we do not have a chance to get to your question, don't worry, we will follow up with you and provide some answers for you. Also, if you want to ask us something that's not directly related to student success, you are also welcome to ask the question. Just know that we're probably not going to answer it live, and that's a question we'll follow up with after the webinar. Also, if you're joining us on a platform other than Zoom and you have a question you want to ask, you can send an email to parents@spu.edu, and we will also try and grab those questions and again, answer as many as we can. And so with that, let me allow my panelists to introduce themselves to you. They're going to tell you their names, kind of what they oversee here at SPU. So Nikki, I'm going to start with you. And if you just unmute yourself, that'd be great.
Hi, my name is Nikki Amarantides, and I'm the director of the Center for Learning. And I also oversee disability support services here at SPU.
Hi, my name is Ruth Adams. I work in student success at Seattle Pacific. So I work with students who both are in need of student support as well as working on different projects related to student success.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Sullivan. I'm the Associate Director of Student Academic Services, and I lead our undergraduate academic counseling team. We work with students in the new student advising process, their initial registration, support advising, and then actually get to help post degrees at the end. So kind of a full circle process.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sharon Barr-Jeffrey. I'm the director of the Student Counseling Center, and we offer mental health counseling to individuals, and we also do relational counseling, so we could see couples and families. So if you want to have a session with your student, that's a possibility.
Well, thank you again, all of you, for being with me tonight. We're just going to jump into questions, and this is going to be very conversational because I hope that we can cover as much as possible. So Nikki, I'm going to start with you. As the director of the Center for Learning, you oversee lots of different aspects of student support. And one of the things that I've noticed in working with first-year students, particularly we get to this time of year, that students struggle for different reasons. And there's all different kinds of reasons why they might find themselves feeling a little overwhelmed. One has to do with just time management and kind of motivation to do the work. And time management is a different thing that they have to do now that they're living independently. So can you start by telling us a little bit about what supports or help are available for students who might be struggling with time management or motivation?
Sure. Yeah, we approach time management in a couple of different contexts. One way is that we're invited to talk to the university colloquium classes, so the freshman only classes, and we've gone into 10 so far and focusing on time management. So we talk to students about getting the big picture for the quarter and noting when their deadlines are for test papers and quizzes. And then we also work with them on setting up almost, you would say, a schedule for their day and their week to make sure that they are, getting their work done at their best, most, awake time of the day, and that they're getting exercise in and sleep and all of that. And we do that in one-on-one settings, as well as in group settings and for instance, in the classes. And then I also teach a class on what's called success skills for college. And we've just finished 2 weeks talking about time management. But you're right, that is I think the presenting issue for all freshmen. And I think with remote learning, it's even more challenging to wrap motivation and structure around the challenges of online learning.
Yeah, thanks. Let's talk a little bit more about online learning, because so many of our students are doing much more of that than they've probably done in the past. And so that can be a real challenge for students. So is there particular ways they can get help for online learning? And I'm going to roll into that question another one that popped up here, because some faculty are holding classes synchronously and some are holding them completely asynchronously. So do you have any tips that parents or families can pass on to their students about how to manage those different kinds of learning experiences?
Well, the first idea that comes to mind is because online learning is so sedentary. We recommend that, that there are breaks during the class, but then after you finish a class, like just get up, get out, move around. If you can, go take a walk, a run, but hydrate. But it really is an endurance test that all of us are going through with working remotely. So first is kind of awakening your brain and your body through physical exercise. I do think then it is, a lot of students who are in asynchronous classes think that they have more time than they actually have. So they might take on more hours at work than they should be because they figure they can squeeze in school at a later time. And that can start a spiral that doesn't lead to success. So it's a balance of taking online learning seriously, almost like an athlete, of giving yourself breaks from it, but then assigning yourself chunks at hour-long chunks or less, whatever your attention span is, to set a goal and get something done, then take a break, come back, do another, have set another goal for that time chunk, and really have, if nothing else is a motivator, get it done by dinner or get it done, no later than 8 o'clock, and then you can unwind and really, start to live your life socially and all of that.
Thanks. That's good advice for all of us. I think I'm in about my 8th hour of screen time today in terms of meetings. So I some of that is great for all of us. I want to ask you a few questions about the services we provide for students with disabilities, because that's an area that falls into your area of responsibility. And one of the things that I think is really helpful to talk with parents and families about is the process of helping students transition from kind of the K-12 environment to the college environment. I myself have a son who has a disability, and through high school he had an IEP, and then he went to college, and I could no longer be his advocate. He really had to advocate for himself. So what advice would you give to parents or family members who are used to playing that advocate role for their student who has a documented disability, about how to now be more of a support player in that?
Well, I think, all students that come to college, in a way, they're coming to create a new identity, or, to just run their lives their way. And they can sometimes trip themselves up by saying, I had a 504 plan, I had an IEP. I don't want anybody to know. I'm just gonna do it. I can do it. And I would say, parents, encourage your student to check in with disability support services. Simply get their documentation on file, whether they use accommodations or not, whether they're, it's just a great way to build a support structure for themselves as they come in. And yeah, they will have to self-identify. We've had parents call and say, could you call my student up and get them into your office? And we're like, well, we don't do that in higher ed. They've got to come to us. So if you can encourage them to come in, and then we can talk about the scope of academic accommodations that we can do, which will be different at the college level, but still we have about over 200 students with disabilities here at SBU. And we've got, I think, an excellent system and excellent staff that is really committed to their success here at the university. So there's no shame, there's no fear. They just need to come in and know they'll be welcomed, and that we're going to try to make sure that they have the best academic environment that will support their learning.
Thank you, Nikki. Ruth, I'm going to turn to you for a minute here, particularly in your role. So a lot of times students get to this point in the semester and they're not even sure exactly how well they're doing in their classes. So so I have kind of a two-part question for you. How do students know how to figure out if they are staying on track in their classes? And then if they find themselves struggling in particular ways, what advice would you give them?
Well, if students are using the systems that are in place, they should be able to look at the Canvas system and be able to see if their professors are grading them. They should be able to see how they're doing. They should be able to log into the learning system, which is called Canvas, and see how they're doing. So they should be able to see that at any given time. And if they don't see that, they should be able to ask their professor and say, how am I doing? And I realize that can be kind of a daunting thing, but that's another thing, another growth moment for students to be able to talk to their professor and to ask them how they're doing. Professors are very, very open to being asked that. And they want to be asked. They want those conversations. I noticed that one person asked, how do professors interact with students? Do they have office hours and things like that? And they do. Professors, almost all the professors list on their syllabi what their office hours are and when they're available to students. And students can make appointments with them either in person. Some faculty are listing on their syllabi what office hours are in person and what office hours are over Zoom, so that students can choose whichever way they want to meet with their professor and connect with them and talk about how they're doing in class. So those are the first two things I would say, is that they need to be talking with their professor. If there's a TA, because some classes have both a professor and a TA, they can talk to the TA as well. And if they are not comfortable with either one of those, if for some reason they're not comfortable with talking to the professor, they can also talk with their academic counselor. They can talk with me. We can also advocate for them. So there are other people that can also talk about that. I think your other question was, if they're struggling academically, what should they do? That's also in Nikki's shop. The Center for Learning has tutoring resources, as well as academic coaching that's available for students to be able to sit down with someone and see if there's different opportunities available for them to try and utilize those opportunities between now and the end of the quarter to successfully complete the quarter, Or if there's perhaps another option that they should look at, we can talk about those as well. Maybe it would be better for them to withdraw from the class, because sometimes that is a better choice. Or to, focus on their other classes instead. We can talk about those options so that they have all the information that they need. But most of the time, honestly, students are a lot harder on themselves. They think they're not doing as well, when in reality, the professor will say, no, you're doing really well. You're doing fine. You're doing just what I expected you to be able to be doing at this point. And it's usually just a conversation with the professor that makes most students feel so much better. So that's why we encourage that first step is to talk to the professor. Always talk to the professor first.
And then beyond talking to the professor, we have lots of resources available, some of which we're talking tonight. But is there a place that students can go, like on the website, to find what resources are available to them?
We also have what's called the Student Resource Hub, and I'm happy to post that in the question and answer. I can put the link to it, or you can go to the website and just type in the search. You can type in Hub, and it'll go to it. In that, it lists all of the academic resources, the career resources, the student support resources. All of them are chunked together so that you can find them. But all of them and all the links to all of those places are listed there. So the hub is where you really want to go.
Thanks for that, Ruth. I'm going to jump back over to Nikki really quick, because you did mention the tutoring options that are available in Nikki's area. And Nikki, also there's a question about study groups and whether or not there's a way for help kind of organizing those. So can you tell us a little bit about the tutoring that's available, and then maybe how could students go about getting help forming a study group?
Sure. And I also have a shameless plug for what I think is a really helpful video on the SPU YouTube channel, and it's called Faculty Office Hours at SPU. And I'll put that in our Q&A, because it's a delightful conversation between a student and a faculty member to just sort of take the fear out of going to office hours. But yes, we have tutoring for what have been historically the most challenging classes for freshmen and sophomores as they enter the university. As you can guess, they are math, biology, chemistry, psychology, and U Foundations. So with our, limitations due to COVID, we have now been introducing students in those classes to a computer app called Penji, which is about a penguin that you can download on your computer and in your phone. And if you are it then gives you drop downs to locate your class, and then what time you can get to a tutor. And so there are two formats, one that's small group and one that is drop-in style. So if you have a quick question, you can get a tutor for 10 minutes to help you understand a concept. But if you want a longer session, then you can sign up for the longer one as well. So study groups, though, really often happen when students approach the faculty and say, can we make an announcement in class that that we want to form some study groups, and it can be based on where students are living, if they're on campus, or if they're living at home. Can you help facilitate getting those of us who want to get together to meet up at a certain time? So I would say, ask your faculty to help facilitate that conversation.
Thanks, Nikki.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, I'm going to turn to you now for a number of questions about academic counseling and the work that your team does. I'm actually, there's a couple of questions in the chat as well that I'm going to send your way. But Let's start by just understanding kind of what is the difference between an academic counselor and a faculty advisor, because students have both and they often don't know what the difference is and who to go to for what and why they have two different people they're supposed to talk to. So help us understand why we use that model here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think some of the confusion can come because our team leads the new student advising process. So that often is sort of the first conversation students are having around classes, but students have both an academic counselor and a faculty advisor. The faculty advisor is really the primary advisor. So we assign a faculty advisor in a student's intended area of study, and that advisor really serves them around course selection, course planning, looking at sort of career opportunities and sort of vocational questions and those sort of things. And then we as academic counselors help support that primary advising relationship around questions of policy or process. Our group also does some of the paperwork items. So for example, if your student has transfer credits, our group is the one that will review and bring those transfer credits as a part of a student's record. And then as I mentioned before, we also sort of post the degree at the end. So really, the faculty advisor is the primary advisor, but we're in a support capacity. And the one thing that I will just mention is if students are worried about that, they never need to worry about messaging or emailing the wrong person. If they need to go to a different spot, we'll send them that way. But it's a good opportunity to sort of provide a sort of a full academic advising team for students. And by the way, the student is a very important part of that academic advising team as well. And I would probably say the most important. So really, if we're doing our work well, we're helping to empower students to use the tools and the resources, to ask the questions that they should be asking, and sort of learning, not just in the classroom and not just outside the classroom, but sort of about processes and sort of navigating those questions around advising and decisions.
Great, thanks for that. So you said that a faculty advisor is assigned to a student. What happens if a student doesn't know what they want to major in, or what happens if even after week 3 they are realizing that maybe they don't want to major in that thing that they thought they wanted to major in? You know, it can be intimidating to go to a faculty advisor if they're not in the major that you think you might want to change to, or if you really don't know what you want to study.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing that I would say is not knowing what you want to study, being concerned that you're not in the right major, that is an incredibly normal thing. That is a very typical place for students to be. And I think the biggest challenge there is, you know, when we come to college and when we talk around things at college, everyone is asking, where are you from? You know, what dorm do you live in if you're on campus, and what are you majoring in, right? And it feels like everybody has a set answer to that, and they know. But really, you know, from where I sit, it's a very common question. And there are just a lot of different ways that students can explore that. And often sort of diving into classes for the first time can either be an affirmation that they are in the exact right spot, but it also could raise some questions about whether this is the right place for them to be. You know, if they're, you know, in a chemistry class and it's not very enjoyable for them and they realize their major has 6 more chemistry classes, it could be a good opportunity for conversation. The other great thing is that we have a whole set of general education requirements that students do need to complete, but it's just a tremendous opportunity for students to explore different areas. And there's nothing better than a student, you know, taking a class in a general education category and discovering something they didn't even realize they were interested in, new passions and new interests that way. So those GE requirements just provide a lot of opportunity to explore. The last thing that I would say is we have a Center for Career and Calling, which provides a lot of support to students around these questions. They have a tremendous inventory called Pathway U. I've taken it. I felt it was helpful for me. It's a very comprehensive, user-friendly tool. And that's one thing I would say. If your student is having some question around what they're majoring in, what they're planning to study, what they're wanting to do, take that inventory, encourage them to do that. It's going to be very, very helpful for them. And I think it's going to help inform some of the conversations that they can have with their faculty advisor, with their academic counselor, with the Center for Career and Calling, and sort of all around. And so, you know, all those little pieces can kind of come into play. And I think students are always looking for sort of the 100% affirmation and confirmation that they're in the exact right spot. I think this is one of those growth opportunities for them to realize that probably is not going to happen. It's probably never going to feel 100% certain. And that doubt can be good because it can help encourage you to seek out ways to sort of confirm that you're in the right spot.
Thanks, Mark. I've got some more questions for you, but I'm going to come back to those. I'm going to jump over to Sharon now for a few questions because Sharon, we know that we can talk all we want about academic support, but a lot of times what students are struggling with are mental health issues or just other kinds of adjustment issues to college. And so we consider our counseling center a vital part of our student support services. And so I'm wondering if you could talk from your perspective a little bit about coping strategies. I mean, this whole year has been really incredibly stressful for all of us, but I mean, especially I think for students who are starting college. So can you give some advice, and maybe even from a parent or family perspective, on how they can help their students think about managing or coping with stress?
Mm-hmm. Sure. It's true. It's an extraordinary stressful time, and to make a big transition in life, like leaving home and starting off to college. And I think sometimes we get in our head about it and think, oh, there must be some magic solution or tactic. And the reality is it's kind of the things that we've already been hitting on. Like Nikki was talking about, it's taking breaks, it's moving your body, it's remembering that you're a human being and taking care of eating, sleeping, moving, getting some social connection. And sometimes when I'm meeting students for the first time, these are the things I'm asking. It's not even about self-concept or how your interpersonal communication's going. It's literally, how are you sleeping? Are you getting breaks? How many credits are you taking? Is that manageable? And so there's a bit of living into it, a bit of trial and error that they're needing to do, whether we're in this remote learning situation or any beginning of college. But I think along with just adjustment to college in general, I think the hardest part is getting social connections in the new place because of social distancing, and there's not as much opportunity to sit with your whole floor around the dinner table, for example. But I know there's a ton going on campus in order for students to get a chance to talk and meet each other. I know there's a scavenger hunt going on this week that's really fun, that encourages students to team up with people in different areas and get to know them. I know they did a speed friending event where students were able to meet other students. So I think that's the biggest piece right now, is figuring out how do they build a sense of connection to relationships on the campus when we're needing to do things with that social distance.
Thanks, Sharon. If a student decides that maybe speaking to a counselor would be a good idea, I know sometimes there's a little bit of a hurdle to get over there in terms of even connecting to the counseling center. So how can students get connected to a counselor? And can you also talk about, there's a question here about whether there's a limit to the number of counseling or mental health sessions that students can take advantage of?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've tried to make it really accessible to students. This year, we were able to add a contact us button to our website so that students could just hit that button, fill out their phone number, their name, and their availability when they want us to call them back. So we can reach out back to them, find out how soon did they need or want to come in, and get them scheduled. We do have same-day appointments available. So if a student's just really hitting the wall and feeling overwhelmed and wants to be seen right away, we have counselors keep their schedule flexible for that. And then the other opportunity we're introducing this Friday is on Friday afternoons from 2:30 to 4, we're having a counselor available for just students to drop into a Zoom. They would have their own 15 minutes or so with a counselor. It's called Let's Talk. And so it's just so they can get a sense of what might it be like to talk to a counselor. Maybe they're not ready to commit that they want to have sessions scheduled regularly, but maybe they want to chat about something that's been on their mind, get some feedback, and kind of put their toe in the water. So Let's Talk on Fridays. If they know they want help, do that contact form, and we'll get in touch with them and get them scheduled. And then what was the second question you mentioned?
No, I think that was it.
That covered?
Yeah. Just how do they get connected to a counselor? Oh, and how many?
Session limits.
Yeah,
that was the other piece. For the most part, we're doing short term. About 25% of the student body every year requests some form of our counseling service. So that's a lot. We can't see all of them all year as much as we would want to. And sometimes they don't need it. Maybe they're contemplating a major change and they're really wrestling with that. And we meet a time or two and they've resolved that issue. So on average, students come in either between 1 and 6 times. The most frequent is students come in once or twice, and then the average is 5 sessions. So we set our kind of max around 6, and some students use all of those and some use fewer. If they want ongoing support, we'll help them get a referral to someone near campus in the Seattle area.
Great. Yeah, thanks. That's helpful. One more question. I mean, in some ways, we've already answered this, that you gave some answer and Nikki gave some answer, but there is this problem, I think, that all of us are experiencing with screen fatigue. And so we've already talked about getting up and moving, our bodies around, but can you give any other suggestions for how to handle a life lived online, like many of us are doing right now?
Yeah, well, I did a little research because I knew that was a question, and I'm living that life as well. And it's true, as much as you can have breaks, if you can get outside into nature, that's great. Just take a walk, take a quick lap around the building if you don't have time for more. But some of the things that we're really validating is this idea that it's very intense to have this constant eye contact. And socially, when we're in a space together, we do a lot where we divert our eyes and we mitigate that, but there's an intensity of all this face-to-face. So one suggestion I came across was you don't always need to have the conversation with the video running. So I don't know, when students are having study groups or group chats with friends or whatever, they could opt to just have cameras off and talk, or just do an audio contact that way. I think we get in this habit now where any contact has to have this video option because it's there. But I thought that was helpful. And they also recommended if you don't always have the gallery view on and you just have the speaker view, so that you can focus on one person at a time and not get distracted by all the movement going around. And even putting a Post-it note over your own image, because it can be very distracting to see how you appear while you're on camera. So just stick something on there so you're not even seeing yourself. But little things like that. And then I think just that back to basics of taking those breaks, getting moving, making sure you hydrate and sleep.
It makes me laugh a little bit because those of us who are of a certain age, remember back when talking was the only option, right? We didn't have video.
Yeah, for these guys, it's a last resort. Picking up the phone, what? We never do that.
Right. Thanks. Those actually are very helpful tips.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think let's shift a little bit to talking about actually next term. I know we're only in week 3, but we're already doing planning here on winter term. So Mark, I'm going to come back to you. Can you tell us a little bit, first of all, what's happening in terms of some of the changes in the course schedule, and when students will really see what's really a finalized course schedule? And then also, what is the process like for students to get registered for winter term?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I would say is October 12 is when the schedule for winter quarter should reflect final changes, if any changes are going to happen to courses in terms of instructional approach or instructional methods. So we've shared that information with students in a couple of ways, and we'll provide that reminder, but that's maybe a good reminder for you to provide your student as well. When we think about signing up for winter, especially for students who are new this year, it's a little bit of a shift from what they might have experienced in new student advising, where sort of the advising and the registering piece happen simultaneously in a conversation like this over Zoom or through our direct registration survey process. What happens sort of in the regular school year, or sort of as students move along, is that they will actually do the advising and the registering separately from one another. So actually, today, we sent out sort of our first message to students to begin preparing them for kind of the different steps they need to be thinking about for registration for winter quarter, reminding them of things like holds, who their faculty advisor is, and kind of what the next steps are that they're going to need to take. And one of those steps, especially for new students, is they're going to need to meet with their faculty advisor. And that's a great opportunity to have a conversation about their interests, their course planning, and all those kind of good things. And then from that conversation, students will develop a schedule that they'll look at for winter quarter. And then when their registration time comes, which is always going to be, well, for this quarter will be the first week of November, then they'll have that information and actually do the signing up for classes on their own. By the way, we will send students a notice when their registration time has been set. It's also available for them to view in Banner. And part of the message we sent them today gave that instruction, and we give reminders of that sort of as we move along. I want to also mention that when it comes to registration, there are a lot of other supports and reminders that are built in. I mentioned that message that went out today. We have an email newsletter that we send to students called Navigate that helps sort of orient students to where they are in the quarter in terms of advising and class planning type questions. And so those messages will continue and provide reminders and encouragement to students to connect with their faculty advisor for that step. We also, Nikki's team has a chance to visit the colloquium, as does my team. And we have a chance to sort of reshare all this information with students, much of which was a part of their new student advising process, by the way, but we definitely know, I mean, that might have been 5 months ago, 6 months ago, and certainly at a moment where there was just so many things happening and so many things that new pieces of information that students were taking on. So visiting the colloquium courses is a great opportunity to provide those reminders and just take all kinds of the questions from students and hopefully make them feel more comfortable. One last really great resource is that our team, the academic counselors, host drop-in appointments every registration week. We also do that every first week of the quarter too. So 6 weeks during the year, they can join us for those. In our more remote focused environment, we do those like this over Zoom. And it's a great chance because, even though the faculty advisor is the student's primary advisor, if they've talked about classes, they go to sign up, and something doesn't happen as planned. Maybe their class is full, maybe they missed a restriction, and I can guarantee you one of those things is going to happen at some point. So hopefully students have prepared some backup options, but our team is available to help sort of manage those questions and concerns. So your students should not panic. We have those opportunities to help them out and kind of work through those next steps. And then really registration will look like that each quarter. And I think get easier and easier as they move along.
And Mark, it's probably hard for parents and families to think about graduation while we're here in our first term. But I think it's also good to be encouraging students to be thinking about graduation even now. So can you say a few things about how students can make sure that they stay on top of their academic progress and are making progress towards graduation?
Yeah, a really big way are these conversations with faculty advisors, right? Those check-ins, and by the way, students are required to have that meeting their entire first year, and even if it's not required after that point, it's really very much encouraged as an opportunity to check in. And just as students should check in with their professors about how they're doing in a class, they should check in with their faculty advisor about how they're doing with their overall degree progress. We also have a few other checkpoints that sort of happen. Students, as they get closer to graduation, we do sort of a large audit and review for them to hopefully identify anything that maybe they missed or maybe they're planning to take care of, but just to provide a reminder of for them. So that engagement is really important with people, faculty advisor, academic counselor, all the offices that are here to sort of provide support to themselves and reminders, but also the tools and the resources. I mean, Ruth mentioned the resource hub. That's a great spot. But we have a degree audit system in Banner where students can review all of their general degree requirements and all of their major requirements. And it's an accurate and sort of official record of everything they have done and everything they need to do. So that is a great tool. We have suggested course sequences, and all kinds of different things that direction to help keep students on track. The last thing that I'll just say is to help ensure timely graduation, make sure your student is asking questions. If they're unsure about something, if they're uncomfortable, if they see something that doesn't look right, we certainly are very invested in them and very invested in their completing, but no one's going to know their situation better than them to be able to lift up those questions and get help. So hopefully we're providing all of these resources that students can access to get those kind of questions answered, staying engaged and asking questions on the way.
Thanks so much. We've got a number of questions that I think I'm just going to take a stab at answering because they don't necessarily fall within the area of any of my panelists. So people are asking a little bit about winter quarter and kind of what that will look like in terms of online classes or face-to-face classes. We did send out a notice to students last Thursday that came to them in an email from me, from my office, telling them that we are taking a similar approach to course planning for the winter quarter. And Mark described that the revised schedule will be available on October 12th. We are still in a very similar situation here in Washington and in King County as we were at the end of the summer, which was only actually a few weeks ago. And so because of the process of needing to do all kinds of things to get ready for winter, we have decided to take a pretty similar approach. So faculty will be choosing the course modalities or instructional methods that are most relevant for their particular classes. And then, as we did before, through that process of working with faculty advisors and academic counselors, students will be able to put together a schedule. I know that there's more in-person learning that I think students would like to have, and we hope to have some more of that in the winter than we've had in the fall, but that will really depend on what the faculty decide in terms of what modality is going to best serve the purposes of different courses. I can tell you that there's advantages both to being in person and being online. I have a husband who's teaching a class right now where he's doing some online components, and then he has students in class, half the class on Mondays, half the class on Wednesdays. And one of his observations is, because of the way that we have to spread the classes out and wear masks, there are some things about being in person that are actually less preferable than being online right now. So all of those factors are being considered by faculty in terms of the particular details of their course when they decide what instructional method is going to serve the course and the students and the learning outcomes the best. So that's the question about what next quarter will look like. Some of you are also asking for a bit of a campus COVID-19 update. And rather than going into details now, what I want to remind you is that our Smart Start website is still up and running, even though it's called Smart Start and we are well underway. We are continuing to update that website with the latest information, with any planned changes in our planning that we adopt. There is also a public-facing dashboard there that is reporting when we have COVID cases on campus. We have to be very careful, just so you all know, with both HIPAA and FERPA in terms of the kind of information we are allowed to give out when there are suspected or confirmed cases on campus. And so we really can't give identifying information when there are confirmed cases. But if students have had a close contact with someone with a suspected or confirmed case, they will be asked to go into quarantine if they're living here on campus. And we're continuing to work through our processes of supporting students in quarantine. It's been a heavy lift for us, but I think we have some systems underway now that are working a little bit better than the very first time that we had to do that. And thankfully, the incidence of COVID on campus have been very low. And so we're quite happy about that, and they've been pretty contained, and so things seem to be going well. There was a question earlier, Sharon, and I'll come back to you, about kind of the kinds of support students who might find themselves in quarantine can get. So obviously we're giving them, meal supports and things like that, but what about kind of that mental health piece? I know it's hard to feel all alone in that quarantine situation.
Yeah, definitely. We have a whole section on our website, actually Coping with COVID, that has some resources for what to do while you're in quarantine to care for your mental health. And I know that there has been a lot of care shown. I was part of a committee putting together some care packages to send out. And I know that meant a lot just for students to know people are thinking of them. And I think that we have offered too, if students want to meet together with a counselor, we'd be willing to do that. And I think so far they're doing okay. They're probably getting a little bit stir crazy, just as we all would be when we're limited in our movement. But we even have some resources on there for different exercise classes and yoga and things they can do indoors to stay active. I think that's the biggest thing is none of us like to feel grounded, right? Like we're stuck, we got to stay put. So ways to have creative outlets and outlets to move and outlets to connect with other people. There's still avenues for that. And and then there's still access to all the support services that are available to all students, even during the time that they're in quarantine. So we've spoken with a few students who were in a quarantine situation and they can still maintain their appointments. So that's sort of the upside of everything already being established to do remotely.
Yeah, and Ruth, let me come over to you. If a student finds themselves in quarantine, what should they do in terms of their classes? So how do they communicate with their faculty? What if they feel nervous about trying to communicate with their faculty? What would you suggest they do to make sure that they stay up on their coursework?
Well, as soon as a student goes in quarantine, the Dean of Students, Chuck Strawn, and I reach out to those students, and the students know that they can ask us to connect with their faculty immediately. So some students have asked us to intervene right then, and most students have said that they're fine and comfortable talking with the faculty themselves. Our faculty have been really quite generous in working with students. Our students who are in quarantine that had in-person classes have all been switched to doing online classes during the time that they've been in quarantine. So all of those kind of things have all been worked out as students have needed to have them worked out while they've been going through this. And all of the faculty have managed to adjust assignments and things like that. So students know usually as soon as they go in quarantine that they can ask for that assistance right away.
Great, thanks. And fingers crossed we won't have too many more of these cases, but we are, dealing with each and every one as they come and trying to do our best to support all of the affected students. So we continue to ask for all of your prayers and your encouragement for your students as well if they find themselves in that situation. So we are getting towards the end of our time here, and I think we've answered most of the questions. I will say there are some questions that were in our last webinar that we didn't get to, and we are in the process of compiling and posting an FAQs that we developed from those questions that were asked last time, especially the ones that we weren't able to answer. So we'll get you information about how to get that information. To get the information from those FAQs specifically, but also let me just remind you once again to go to that Smart Start website. It has lots of information about what's happening, and your students can also be connecting with resources there, as well as through some of these other places that we've talked about tonight. There is a question here about whether the flooding problem in Emerson has been resolved. I don't have the answer to that question. I will tell you we had quite an amazing downpour the other day that flooded not just Emerson, but some other buildings. I assume it has been dealt with, but I don't want to say that without knowing for sure. So we will get the answer to that question and get that out as well. And I believe that then is all of the questions that have been asked. And so let me just turn to my panelists one more time. Is there anything else you'd like to share that's come to mind as we've been having this conversation that you think would be helpful for parents or families to know as they continue to support their students in this unusual quarter?
Yeah, I'd like to just add that if your student is struggling in any capacity in terms of their coursework, I mean, we meet one-on-one with them to look at how are they studying, what's their reading strategy, let's take a look at your notes, let's pull out your textbooks and see what that looks like. And of course, I'm using language that sounds like we're in person. And we have been meeting with some students at safe distances, masked up, if they're living on campus, but the majority of our work is done through Zoom. And, and we have those same kinds of conversations. So just know that there's staff here ready to do one-on-one work. And we also have what we call peer academic coaches, which are students who have, excelled academically and who also are in the student experience right now. And they're, in particular, the two we have this year are chemistry and biology majors. So they bring, real content specific skills as well as skills about how to be a student. So just know that your student can go to our website as well and click on, make an appointment and they can meet with us.
Thank you, Nikki. Anything else that any of our other panelists would like to add?
I would just say to parents that are wondering if there's any way for your students to get out of their room and to socialize with one another. On Friday night after the scavenger hunt, all the food trucks are going to be on campus Friday night. So have your students mask up and join each other in the loop for food truck night, because even if they didn't participate in the scavenger hunt, they can still join food truck night. So please have them do that. That's a great way for them to connect with one another at a safe distance and enjoy some really good food.
Thanks for that, Ruth. And there are more activities that are being planned, both virtually and in person for our students. So as the quarter unfolds, they'll have more opportunities for those social connections. And I have to tell you, we've had beautiful weather this week. So I've seen so many more students out in Tiffany Loop, eating dinner outside, and it's been really lovely. So students are definitely starting to connect more and, getting out a little bit more. So that's good to see. Well, thank you all so much for joining me this evening. Parents and family members, thank you for taking the time to come and ask your questions. I hope we were able to get your questions answered, but if you have any follow-up questions, please, again, feel free to use that parents@spu.edu email address. We have a team of people who's monitoring that email regularly, and we'll try and get you any answers to questions that you send along our way. We really do see you as partners in our effort here with your students. You are a tremendous part of the student success team that's surrounding them. And so we feel very honored that you've entrusted your student to us and are really eager to support them in many ways. And I hope that our webinar tonight has given you just a little taste of the many ways that we really want your students to be successful and the ways that we're prepared to help them do that. So with that, I will say good night. Once again, that email address is parents@spu.edu. So feel free, as I said, to send more questions. So thanks again, Mark, Nikki, Sharon, Ruth. I really appreciate your time. If you want to connect with any of these individuals, you can also send an email to that parents address and we will forward that to them if you have specific questions about anything that any of our panelists have discussed tonight. Thank you all for being with us and have a wonderful evening. Good night.